I think one of the biggest things about changing career is the fear, but it's so important to realise that everybody feels that fear. 17, 18-year-old me thought I was going to be a scientist. And then 18, 19-year-old me thought I was going to be an accountant. Mid-20s, I thought I was going to be at home for the rest of my life, bringing up my kids. And then in my late 20s, I thought I'd be in the leisure industry for the rest of my life. In my experience, it's perfectly normal to have this freak out moment where some of you may decide to go off traveling. Some of you may decide to go and sign up for a marathon. And some of you, like me, may decide to do a career change. And sometimes those moments where it's scary, where you have this itch, this need to change something in your life, sometimes that's one of the best moments for you. And even though it's really scary, I think it is something that you should walk towards if you can. But it's all about going about it in the right way. As somebody who's had more than one career change, I can honestly say there is nothing scarier than changing career. The thought of leaving that job that you thought was your forever career, the colleagues that you know, the insides and outs, the dependable wage. There's nothing scarier. Hi, I'm Cazmooney, and I talk to successful individuals to find out the path they've taken to get to where they are today. They are sharing their journey along the way, sharing the choices they've made. And there's one thing they all have in common, and that is that they have had a change in career. Not one of the successful individuals I've spoken to so far has had a straightforward path. There's been twists and turns, and they've ended up often working in a career they never envisioned. There has been so many moments, I'm sure, where they had to make choices along the way, and I'm sure many of these moments were fearful. On Instagram a few weeks ago, I asked you in my stories if you had ever thought of having a career change. And I had so many messages from you guys saying that you're thinking of doing it right now. But so many of you have fears about changing career. And you have so many questions about how that is possible. And as somebody who's changed careers more times than I can count, I feel like I should share some of the tips that I've learned along the way. But before I do that, I thought I would share my own story. So I started working at the age of 12. And believe it or not, I started working in a castle. And even though I was working in a castle, I didn't get paid very well. But it was more about the experience because I really wanted to be around horses. And so I worked in a stable yard. From there, then I started doing babysitting. I worked in a newsagent's for a summer. And I had another stable job, and I basically worked all the way through secondary school. My final job in secondary school, I worked all the way into college, and that was in a bar and a restaurant. And I think it was so important for me personally to work with people and to, learn customer service. Anybody who's worked in customer service will know the joys of that sometimes. And it was a job that was quite physical. I was on my feet all day, but it got me through college. So when I finished school, I decided to go into college to do science. I went into general science and I thought I was going to be a scientist. It was a grand year. It wasn't the course that I expected it to be. And then that summer, after doing first year in science, I was lucky enough to be offered a place working in an accountancy firm. And before I knew it, I ended up getting approached by my boss in the accountancy firm, and he highly recommended I start training in accountancy. So some of you will see from what I do that I am very figure orientated at times. That's why I probably have some idea about budgeting. So I worked full-time in the accountancy and I studied part-time in college. And I did that for a few years, and then I decided to change jobs, and I worked as a bookkeeper and I worked in sales, and then the recession hit. So I had to stop working. I had lost my job due to the recession, as I'm sure so many people have. And I was also pregnant with my first child. So found it very difficult at that time to find a job. And it was also a period where my husband also was employed for a time. So the two of us were unemployed and we had a child on the way. And it was a very difficult time financially for us. And we weren't the only ones. We were, along with many people all around the country, queuing up for the dole. And it was a very difficult time financially. It was probably one of the most difficult times financially. So then I decided to stay home. We decided to have another child and I became a stay-at-home mum. And I was a stay-at-home mum for about 7 to 8 years. And it's extremely difficult to get back into the world of work when you have been at home for a while like that. Not just because it's hard to apply for jobs, but also confidence. Confidence is a massive part of getting back into the world of work. And I'm sure many people who have even been at home for maternity leave and have thought about changing jobs when they go back will realise how hard it is. So in order to bridge the gap between my confidence and the world of work, I decided to go back to college and I decided to retrain again. So we've done science, we've done accountancy, and now I'm going into the leisure industry. So much to the surprise of everyone around me, I'm sure, I decided to go into leisure management. And it was when my second child went to school. So I was dropping the kids off to school and I was going to college myself. And it was a very, very hard time financially. And it was a very, very hard time for our family because I was coming home at the same time or just after the kids. And then I was having to study at night. And yeah, I did that for a few years and I ended up becoming Student of the Year, which I was very proud of at the time. And I got really good results from that. While I was studying in that course, because I'm crazy, I decided to also work part-time. And it was great for getting experience and getting back into the world of work. So as soon as I finished that course, I then decided to work full-time. I actually did 3 interviews in one day. And if anyone has worked in the leisure industry, you will know that it's not uncommon to audition for your interviews. So auditioning is where you basically do the job for an hour or so. So it was a very tiring day that day. And the interviews were all over the place. And I ended up getting all 3 jobs. And I ended up taking the one that was local to me. And I worked in a lovely little gym and I worked for a lovely family who were very entrepreneurial and very inspiring. And I worked there for a good few years and I also went back to college and studied part-time. And I ended up getting degrees. So I've done so many courses and I really loved that time. I was working with public, I was working with people, I was helping people to become who they wanted to be, and it was such a fulfilling job. It was an incredibly demanding physical job, but it was also so rewarding. Then COVID hit. So I was back to this place where the whole world froze for a moment. I remember the announcement happening on Friday. Somebody came into work, said there was going to be an announcement at 12 and I didn't believe them. And there was, and I walked out at 2:00 and I wasn't back for like a year or more. I live in the Midlands and it was, I think, one of the most shut down areas in the country. And there was at least 4 shutdowns. In that time, it was a time where I'm sure so many of us really reevaluated our situation. Myself and my husband, we had bought our house in the October before COVID. And I'm sure many of you know my journey to being able to buy that house. We had gone on a no spend year. We'd gone on a big journey to be able to afford the deposit for that house. And so when COVID hit, we had a moment where we didn't really know what to do. We had, the keys for the house in our hands, and we'd only been in the house for about 2 months of that year. We decided we were going to do up the house on a budget, of course. And career-wise, I just didn't know what to do. So we decided we would maybe have a third child. So we went on to have a third child, and I was lucky enough to get some part-time work with the same employers that were employing me in my current job. They also owned a shop, and I was so thankful for that, because it meant that I was still working with people. I still had a touch on the world of work, and I still was, had a purpose. I found it incredibly difficult to go from running at 100 miles an hour to stopping. It was so mentally difficult to suddenly being at home. It was nice for the first 2 weeks, but then it starts to get a bit difficult. So I was working part-time, and so then I was pregnant, obviously, with my third, and just before maternity leave, we had another lockdown, and so I ended up that I was at home just before I had my third. I was taking a year's maternity leave because I had obviously not used my holidays with lockdowns. It was a very strange time. And so I took my year's maternity leave. My third child took a lot of time. He didn't like napping. And I didn't know how I was going to return back to the job that I was doing. The job I was doing before COVID was not maybe the most sociable. A lot of shift work, a lot of late nights. I wasn't sure how I was going to approach that with a young baby. So I decided to approach my employer and take a career break from that job. That same week, I posted on Instagram. It was probably the worst time ever to start a budgeting page, right before Christmas, the week before Christmas. But that's when we were starting our new path, and that was going from 2 incomes down to 1 income. And so my Instagram was, in a way, a personal blog of how we were going to navigate this situation. And so I decided I was going to share this. I was going to be very honest about, the highs and lows, and also draw from my own experience. And if it helped other people, all well and good. Here we are today. I don't know how this has ended up becoming my new career, but it has. I've had a book somehow. I've been on radio, TV. There's so many of you following me, which is crazy. But for me, it's the joy I get is from talking to you guys. I'm hopefully helping some of you with some of the advice that I share. And I can't believe you're all listening to my podcast. So yeah, if you're thinking about doing a career change, what are some of the tips that I'd recommend? I think one of the biggest things about changing career is the fear. But it's so important to realize that everybody feels that fear. 17, 18-year-old me thought I was going to be a scientist. And then 18, 19-year-old me thought I was going to be an accountant. Mid-20s, I thought I was going to be at home for the rest of my life, bringing up my kids. And then in my late 20s, I thought I'd be in the leisure industry for the rest of my life. In my experience, It's perfectly normal to have this freak out moment where some of you may decide to go off traveling. Some of you may decide to go and sign up for a marathon. And some of you, like me, may decide to do a career change. And sometimes those moments where it's scary, where you have this itch, this need to change something in your life, sometimes that's one of the best moments for you. And even though it's really scary, I think it is something that you should walk towards if you can. But it's all about going about it in the right way. So why should you change career? For me, there's 3 reasons why you should change career. Those 3 reasons being finances, people, and love. So finances is an easy one. Are you getting enough money for the time you're putting into this job? Could you earn your money better in a different way? People, whether that is spending time with the people around you, whether that is struggling to get on with your co-workers, or whether it is to be around more people every day or around less people every day. I'm somebody who thrives off being around people, so that's a big one for me. And then finally is love. Do you love what you do? You can say that it doesn't matter too much, but in my experience, you have to really quite enjoy your job. You are spending so much time of your life in your job. So it's quite important to actually love it. So the big question then is how? How do you change career? For me, I think that there is a period of uncomfortableness that has to take place for you to change career. Almost like pulling back a slingshot. You have to go back a little bit before you go forwards. So whether that is retraining in college, whether that is investing in your future, or whether that is applying for jobs that are a lower pay grade in order to change career and go towards your new goals. That period of uncertainty can be quite difficult, and it's often that fear of that period that's stopping you from changing career. And I don't think you can underestimate the fear of the thoughts of those around you. I've experienced this. Obviously changing career and pivoting a few times. I've had friends and family question why I am doing certain things, particularly when I was sharing my journey online publicly. But it is so important to think about why you are changing this career. What is your goal? And really set in stone where you want to be. And I think it can be really helpful if you write it down somewhere. Write down where you would like to be and really start to map out the course in which you can get there. How are you going to get to this place? Another tip that I found is to set a date that you're going to give this changing career your best shot by. So for example, when I decided to change career and go towards the leisure industry, I decided that I was going to give it my best shot for 2 years. I was going to give it 1 year in education and then 1 year in the world of work. And if it didn't work out, if it wasn't for me, then I would pivot and I would have gotten the confidence in the world of work, but I also would have given it my best shot. I did something similar when I first started sharing my journey online. I decided I would give it a year. I took that year's career break, and it meant then that I had the confidence to go forward for that full year. So set yourself a timeline, whether that's 1 year, whether that's 2 years, whether that's 5 years, to give it your best shot, and be realistic. If you're looking to become the CEO, you need to give yourself time to get there. If you're looking to become manager, you need to give yourself time to get there. Another thing that I found really important, especially when it comes to finances, is to look at what's available to you. Can you get back to education allowances? Can you get a grant? What about childcare subsidies? Look at ways to make it more financially viable for you to change careers. Another thing that's important to look at is look at who's around you. Who are your support network, your village? Look at friends, family, co-workers, childcare, your partner, anybody around you that can help you get to where you want to be. And that doesn't just mean financially, that also means in emotional support, because you're going to be making a big change. And then lastly, in order to make this change, it's really important. I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't tell you to have a look at your budget. It's so important to make sure that you are able to make this change financially and that your household is going to be able to deal with this change. So you may be dealing with a drop in finances. You may be going to college. You may have to pay for extra expenses in order to make this change. So look at your numbers and figure out if you are able to make this change financially. What are the minimums your family needs, your household needs in order to make this change? What minimums do you need coming in every week? And if you do decide to make this career change, will it be possible? I know it can be difficult to find these things, so I've left loads of links for resources that I recommend in the show notes. And I've also left you a budget template for you to get started writing down that budget and figuring out how you're going to start this career change. Now, to finish off the podcast, I always love to ask my guests a question that's off the wall and gets them thinking. And it's a financial question, but I think I would like to ask you guys a question just to get you thinking about this career change. What is your dream career? Are you currently working in that career? And if not, what is stopping you? Thank you so much for listening. I hope I've given you some food for thought about changing your career. I know it's a big step, but it's an exciting one. Do let me know how you get on. And I'm so excited for my next guest who's coming soon. He is an Olympian and his career has taken quite the twist and turn. And his story is going to be such an interesting one. Check me out on Instagram and TikTok at Irish Budgeting. And I'll chat to you in my next episode.